Dozens of children were thrown into a dry well, and the man above sealed the well with a slab under the guise of playing hide and seek with them. Just as the children were gasping for breath, a subway construction team arrived. They decided to fill in the well to build the Ushuaia station. In this way, more than a dozen children were buried alive. But after the construction of Ushuaia station, strange incidents constantly occurred inside the station. A college student waiting for the subway even heard the crying of children coming from under the tracks. He quickly bent down to look, but suddenly, this latest Korean horror film is said to be based on a real event at Ushuaia Station on Line 3. The story is so heart-wrenchingly sharp that many directors wouldn't dare to touch the subject. Hurry and invite your friends to watch it together. After a college student died tragically, Ushuaia Station installed cameras with no blind spots. Yoo-won, on duty, noticed a man entering Ushuaia Station and walking on the tracks. The express train was about to pass through here. Yoo-won quickly ran to the platform, but the man stood still on the track as if he hadn't heard anything. Yoo-won had no choice but to jump down from the platform and run quickly towards the man. But at that moment, Yoo-won realized there was also a little girl crouching next to the man. Yoo-won just wanted to call the girl to leave, but the train came speeding in. The man was crushed to pieces and there were no remains. So Yeom, the coroner, had to collect what was left of the flesh. The scene was so horrific, but the girl was still there. She hid in the shadows, staring intently at Yeom. When Yeom turned around, the girl had disappeared. But inexplicably, there were several scratch marks on Yeom's hand. Yoo-won, having witnessed the tragedy, was in a daze. He washed his face and went out, not noticing the string of numbers that appeared on the glass. Meanwhile, his colleague Sunjun just came out and saw the numbers. He read them out without thinking. Little did he know, these were death numbers. Whoever reads them out becomes part of the list. At the same time, Na-young, a journalist following the accident, found that the express train's driver had been wandering around the accident site since the incident. Na-young immediately ran to interview him.
왜 계속 여기 계시는 건가요?
떨어지지가 않아.
뭐가요?
저거 말이야.
But Na-young didn't see anything. She only noticed that the driver's hands and neck were also covered with scratch marks. Na-young was surprised and asked what happened to the marks. The driver stood up and left. He walked straight into Ushuaia Station. Na-young hurriedly followed, but the driver disappeared. Na-young had no choice but to leave by subway. When she got off, a hand suddenly stretched out from under the track. Na-young was terrified, but the ghostly hand disappeared in the next second. Such terrifying news quickly topped the trending search. But just as her colleagues were congratulating Na-young, the editor-in-chief came questioning.
너 어제 기관사랑 인터뷰한 거 확실해? 그 시간엔 기관사가 이미 죽었을 때라는데 어젯밤 9시쯤 자살했대. 너 도대체 누구랑 인터뷰한 거야? 어?
Na-young was dumbfounded. She hurriedly went to the subway station to retrieve the surveillance footage of her interviewing the driver, but it turned out she was talking to thin air. It was obvious that Na-young had seen a ghost, but Na-young wasn't giving up. She went to the police station to see the driver's body for herself, only to find that the driver's entire face was covered with scratch marks. While Na-young was looking at the old photos of the scratch marks, Yoo-won saw that Yeom's hand also had a new scratch mark, and it seemed like a child was crouching on Yeom's back. But in the blink of an eye, the child disappeared. Yoo-won thought he was seeing things and didn't pay much attention, but soon, he discovered that his colleague Sunjun also had scratch marks on his body. After Yoo-won left, the lights in the area Sunjun was responsible for began to flicker strangely. A woman entered the bathroom, intending to touch up her makeup, but the light above suddenly started to flicker. Suddenly, a child appeared on the wash basin, startling the woman into stepping back repeatedly. The woman quickly looked up. Hearing the woman scream, Sunjun hurried to the bathroom. Seeing a purse still on the wash basin, Sunjun shouted into the bathroom stall, but after waiting a long time with no response, he knocked on the door. Still to no avail, Sunjun had no choice but to peek under the door to check the situation. Suddenly, a pair of ghostly hands climbed onto Sunjun's neck, and he fell in the bathroom, quickly losing his breath. Meanwhile, Yoo-won had just finished work, but as he was leaving Ushuaia Station, a little girl stopped him. There was a string of numbers pinned on the girl's clothes. Under the compelling gaze of the girl, Yoo-won involuntarily read out the numbers, and soon, scratch marks appeared on his body, one after another. Those who died first showed marks on their bodies before their tragic deaths. Yu-won felt his own end was near. Yu-won also dreamt of many little ghosts surrounding him, saying they wanted to take him somewhere. Then, Yu-won found himself in a well, desperately trying to climb up, but the walls were too wet and slippery, his attempts futile. Just as Yu-won was about to give up hope, he saw Sung-joon, who was also in the well. Realizing that Sung-joon was already dead, Yu-won was jolted awake. Just when Yu-won was consumed with fear, the sister of the man who had been crushed by the subway suddenly contacted Na-young, saying she had major insider information to expose. Na-young hurried over. Tae-hee told Na-young that there was a well there before Okesu Station was built, and that the well was next to the Okesu Orphanage. Strangely, on the night Ushuae Station opened, her foster father died, and since then, she and her brother have been frequently dreaming of that well. According to the description, the well in their dreams was exactly like the one Yu-won dreamed of, but Tae-hee couldn't remember what that well had to do with her. To clarify this and to save her boyfriend Yu-won, Na-young decided to find that well. But as Na-young and Yu-won entered Ushuae Station and approached the location of the well, it got colder. Although they saw nothing, Yu-won still felt something approaching. He quickly took out his phone, and the camera began to automatically recognize something. Na-young's voice came from behind Yu-won, but who then was the person he had just been facing? When the real Na-young arrived beside Yu-won, the little ghosts disappeared. Although they were in the same place, Na-young had a natural resilience against these spirits due to her strong character. After sticking close to Na-young, Yu-won no longer encountered any ghosts. They soon found the old site of the well. This well, appearing in different people's dreams, was indeed sinister. Scattered around the well were many bones, all seemingly from children, and it seemed like there were other things buried in the soil nearby. Na-young quickly started digging and found the still undecayed clothes of children. As she dug further, suddenly, the ghosts of a dozen children crawled out from the earth. After more than 30 years in darkness, someone had finally found them. Na-young didn't know how they died there but still promised to.
내가 너희 원한을 세상에 알려줄게.
Suddenly, the children started wailing and then vanished together. After Na-young returned, she wrote about the incident, but her editor-in-chief flew into a rage. It turned out that 30 years ago, the construction team already knew about the children under the well, but to ensure the project proceeded smoothly, they bribed the then journalist, now editor-in-chief, to cover up the incident. That's how Ushuae Station was built. Thus, the editor-in-chief would never allow Na-young's report to be published. Na-young had broken the agreement she had made with the children. These children, with no place to return after death and grievances unaddressed, reignited their wrath. Terrified, Yu-won ran out and happened to meet Yeom. Yeom had been marked early on but was still living well, and the scratch marks on his hand had mysteriously disappeared. Yu-won quickly asked what happened. Yeom told Yu-won that as long as someone who knows about this reads out the number sequence they once read, the death curse would be transferred to that person. Yeom had forced Tae-hee with a knife to read his curse number, transferring it to her. Under the stimulation of fear, Tae-hee's repressed childhood memories were awakened. It turned out that 30 years ago, Tae-hee was in the Ushuae Orphanage. The orphanage director threw some children into the well and then climbed out. The well cover was then closed, but when the children were in utmost terror, it opened again. The director lowered a ladder and had Tae-hee, numbered 1001, climb up. In an instant, light and darkness, escape and imprisonment, all converged on this ladder. The children's upturned faces were covered with old and new scars pinched by the dean. After Tae-hee climbed up, the well cover was sealed forever, but the children below continued to hope desperately until their death. They thought they could survive if called by name like Tae-hee, nameless and without identity. Their admission numbers became their names, so even in death, they longed for someone to call out those numbers. After Tae-hee climbed out of the well, before she could call for help, she watched the director call in an excavator to fill the well under the guise of subway construction, because all the children in the well had their kidneys removed. The director was afraid of being exposed, so he destroyed the bodies, and Tae-hee and her brother were adopted by the orphanage director, but witnessing her companions die, Tae-hee was so pained that she lost her memory, only to recall this childhood tragedy when the death curse awakened her. Knowing he could transfer the curse, Yu-won was both excited and scared because the only other person who knew about this was Na-young. To survive, Yu-won called Na-young, claiming he had a new number for her to remember. Na-young, unsuspecting, repeated the number Yu-won told her. Love's true face is so beautiful. Na-young, who naively accompanied Yu-won into the dark to dig up bones, would never have guessed that Yu-won had hidden the death number in his new phone number, cleverly transferring it to her. Na-young, betrayed by her boyfriend, was at a loss and then found out her boss not only altered her headline story but also forced her to resign. Na Young, although kind-hearted, was no saint. She quickly wrote her resignation and handed it to her boss. When society loses moral conscience, it becomes a zoo of beasts, a monstrous tableau of people tearing at each other, a contagion that first sweeps away the innocent before slowly collapsing and finally turning on the wicked. That's it for today's story. See you next time.